The darkness of the cage was suffocating, like a thick cloud that trapped the air, making it impossible to breathe freely. The only light came from a faint glow above, barely enough to see the rusted bars surrounding her. She was alone. Alone. And helpless. The alien girl lay curled up on the cold metal floor of the cage, her small body trembling from the chill of the space. Her skin, usually soft and smooth, was now marred with bruises and cuts from the brutal treatment she had endured. Her arms were thin, her legs weak, and her mind was exhausted from the constant pain and hunger. She had once been proud, full of life and hope, but now she was a broken shell of who she used to be. Her name was Shira, a name that no one seemed to care about anymore. The last memory she had of her home was the burning of her village, the screams of her people as they were taken by the invaders. Since that day, she had been a prisoner, forced to endure unimaginable horrors. They had sold her like an object, chaining her up in this cage for what? To be used? To be forgotten? The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Shira's heart skipped a beat. She had heard those footsteps before, harsh, cruel, mocking, the soldiers. They always came to laugh at her, to remind her of how worthless she was. The sound grew louder, and her body stiffened in fear. She could hear their voices now, cruel words that cut through the air like daggers. Look at her. She's nothing but a broken creature, one of them said, his voice filled with amusement. Should we feed her? Now, why bother? She's too far gone. Another soldier laughed, his voice dripping with disdain. Shira closed her eyes tightly, trying to block out their words, trying to forget the fact that no one cared. No one ever cared. The only thing that mattered to them was how much she could endure, how long she could last before she gave in to the pain. But she wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Tears began to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't show weakness. Not now, not when she had nothing left but her will to survive. She had been through so much already, and if there was even a tiny bit of strength left in her, she would hold on to it. Please, someone, help me, she whispered softly to herself. It wasn't much, just a prayer, a desperate wish. But, in the silence of the cage, it felt like the only thing she could do. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, Shira thought they had left. But then she heard something else, a faint scraping noise, as if something heavy was being dragged along the floor. She opened her eyes, looking through the bars of the cage, her heart racing. She couldn't see anything through the darkness, but she could feel it. Someone was coming. And then she saw him, a human. He wasn't like the soldiers, dressed in dark armor, their faces hidden behind cold masks. No, this one was different. He wore a simple uniform, his face covered by a helmet, but his posture was different. He didn't move like the others. His steps were slower, more deliberate, cautious. Shira's breath caught in her throat. Could it be? Could this be the one who would help her? The soldier stopped in front of the cage, his eyes meeting hers through the bars. Shira's heart beat faster. She had seen humans before, but they were always the ones who hurt her, who watched as she suffered. But this one, this one, was different. She didn't know how, but she could feel it. There was something in his eyes, something that made her believe he wasn't like the others. The human reached for the cage's lock, his fingers working quickly but carefully. Shira didn't move, unsure if this was some sort of trick. She had been tricked before. She had trusted before. But she had learned the hard way that trust could be broken in an instant. But this felt different. With a soft click, the cage door opened, and the human stepped inside. Shira's breath caught in her throat. He was so close now. She could feel the heat of his body, the strength in his arms. But she still didn't trust him. She couldn't, not after everything she had been through. But then, he did something unexpected. He knelt down in front of her, his hands open in a gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice soft, almost kind. "I'm here to help you." Shira blinked, unsure of what to make of his words. Help? Could it really be that simple? Could he really be different? The soldier reached into his bag and pulled out a small packet of food. It was a simple meal. But to Shira, it was a lifeline. She hadn't eaten in days, and the hunger gnawed at her stomach like a wild animal. She hesitated. Should she take it? Was this another trick? She didn't know. But the soldier didn't push. He just sat there, watching her, waiting. For a long moment, Shira stared at the food. Her body trembled with hunger, but something deeper held her back, the pain of trusting again. Of hoping. She had been let down too many times. Her people, her family, her captors, they had all abandoned her. Was this human any different? And then, something inside her snapped. She couldn't go on like this. She couldn't live in this cage, starving and alone. She had to take the chance. She had to believe. With trembling hands, she reached out and took the food from his hands. For the first time in what felt like forever, Shira allowed herself to believe that someone cared. That maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. Shira's heart raced as she held the small packet of food in her hands. The moment she accepted the offer, the silence around her seemed to disappear. The air felt warmer, as if the shadows that had consumed her for so long were finally retreating. She had never known a moment like this, a moment where a stranger, especially a human, extended kindness, without expecting anything in return. But as she tore open the packet and tasted the food, she realized that this moment, this fragile moment of hope, was something she couldn't afford to waste. She glanced up at the human soldier, still kneeling in front of her. His helmet was tilted slightly, his eyes studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. She hadn't allowed anyone to see her like this in a long time, weak, vulnerable, and broken. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a question that had been eating at her since he first approached. She didn't trust easily. How could she? Every time she had trusted someone before, it had led to pain. The soldier didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up slowly and walked over to the side of the cage, his hands working to loosen the chains that bound her wrists. His movements were careful, deliberate, almost like he was treating her with a level of respect no one had ever shown her before. Shira watched him closely, the flickering light from above, casting long shadows across his face. He wasn't a giant or a warrior. He wasn't dressed in the intimidating armor that most of her captors had worn. He was just ... a man, a human. "Because you deserve better than this," the soldier finally replied, his voice low but firm. "No one should be locked in a cage like this. No one should live like this." Shira's breath caught in her chest. She had heard these words before, but they had never felt real. Every time someone said something similar, it was followed by cruelty, followed by betrayal. It had been a lie. They always turned out to be lies, but this time she wasn't so sure. He reached out to touch her arm gently, and she flinched at the contact. Her body had become so used to rejection and pain that even the slightest touch from another seemed foreign. But instead of pulling away, she stayed still, allowing him to help her stand. "Come on," he said softly, his voice gentle. "I'll help. You're not alone anymore." His words were like a balm to her wounded soul. Could it be true? Could this human really be different from the others who had used her, tortured her, and abandoned her without a second thought? Shira stood shakily, her legs still weak from days of confinement and starvation. The soldier placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but kind. She felt his warmth, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe in something good. But even as she took a step forward, uncertainty gnawed at her. She had been in situations like this before, trapped in false hope, only to be let down again. Could she trust this man? Could she trust anyone? The human soldier seemed to sense her hesitation. He stepped back, giving her space, and looked her in the eyes. There was no mask of coldness or indifference, only something that resembled empathy, something that she hadn't seen in a long time. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. "I'm not like the others. I'm here to help. You don't have to be afraid of me." Shira felt a flicker of something, hope, maybe, or perhaps desperation stir within her chest. But even then, she couldn't silence the voice in her head that whispered, "Don't trust him. Don't let him get close. You'll only get hurt." She closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the internal battle. She had spent so long surviving on her own, building walls around her heart, that letting someone in now felt impossible. Yet, something about this soldier felt different. He didn't see her as a thing to be used, as an object. He saw her as a person. "Where will I go now?" Shira asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound strong. "Where will you go? What do you want from me?" The soldier looked at her with a mixture of determination and sorrow. "I don't want anything from you. I'm taking you somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't hurt you anymore." She could feel the sincerity in his words. There was no hidden agenda, no cruel twist waiting to strike. His words were simple, but they carried weight. He meant them. Still, the fear didn't leave her. Could she trust him? Should she let him guide her out of this nightmare? Her eyes locked onto his, searching for any sign of deception, any hint that he might be lying. But she saw nothing but honesty. The soldier extended his hand toward her once more. His eyes softened, and for the first time since she had been captured, she saw kindness. Shira hesitated for a moment, her mind racing, her heart pounding in her chest. She could run, escape into the dark, try to survive on her own. But the reality of that was grim. She had nothing. No strength, no food, no shelter. And if she ran, there was a chance she would end up right back in the cage, or worse. Her hands trembled as she reached out to grasp his. The moment their fingers touched, something inside her shifted. It was as if the last of her hope, buried deep beneath the layers of pain and betrayal, had finally been set free. "I'm ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but her heart was clear. Together, they stepped out of the cage, into the unknown, where a new chapter awaited, one that could either bring her freedom or more heartache. The choice had been made. She was no longer alone. The cold wind howled through the narrow passageways of the hidden base, its sharpness biting through Shira's thin skin as she followed the human soldier. The walls, lined with rusted metal and old technology, groaned under the weight of time. This place was old and forgotten by most, but to her, it felt like a fragile thread of hope. The soldier led her deeper into the compound, his movements confident, though there was a subtle tension in his posture. He had been quiet since. They left the cage, his eyes scanning the hallways, as if expecting danger at any moment. Shira stayed close, walking behind him, but her mind was racing. What was this place? Who were these people? She didn't know. For all she knew, this could be another trap, another cruel experiment designed to break her spirit further. Her heart pounded in her chest, and despite the small comfort of being freed, fear still had a tight grip on her. "Why are we here?" she asked, her voice a little stronger now, but still unsure. She had to know. The soldier stopped and turned to face her. His helmet had been removed, revealing a strong face, eyes dark with the weight of battle, yet there was something softer about him, something that suggested a man not just hardened by war, but someone who still believed in something worth fighting for. "Because you're not meant to be a prisoner," he said simply, as if the answer was obvious. "I can't undo everything they did to you, but I can give you a chance to be more than just a victim." Shira's heart skipped a beat. He spoke as if he truly cared, as if her survival mattered to him. But was that really true? Could A human care about her after everything that had happened? She had seen the cruelty of her captors, the indifference of her own people. She had heard these words before, spoken by those who later proved to be nothing more than false hopes. Could she trust him? Her thoughts were interrupted when the soldier began walking again, more briskly now. Shira had no choice but to follow. As they moved down another corridor, a door opened, and they stepped into a room filled with strange equipment. Monitors blinked with life, and faint hums of machinery filled the air. It was more advanced than anything she had seen before. This wasn't just some hidden base. It was a hub of technology and knowledge. The soldier motioned for her to sit on one of the chairs. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said, his voice softer now, trying to ease the tension. "But you're safe here for now." Shira stared at the chair for a moment before sitting down cautiously. She kept her hands tightly in her lap, her eyes darting around the room as if something might jump out at her any moment. The human watched her closely but didn't speak again. He seemed to be waiting for something, waiting for her to speak. For a long while, there was nothing but silence between them. The only sound was the soft whirring of the machines in the room. Shira's mind was in turmoil, spinning with thoughts she couldn't quite control. She was confused. Part of her wanted to reach out and trust him, to believe that this human could be her ally. But the scars of her past made it so hard to let anyone in. "You know," the soldier finally said, breaking the silence, "I've seen people like you before. Aliens, I mean. I've fought in battles across worlds. But I've never seen someone so abandoned, so alone." Shira's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly, her voice wavering for the first time. The soldier leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "I've fought wars, been on missions, but I've never felt what I felt when I saw you back there. It wasn't just the look in your eyes, it was the fact that you didn't even fight back. You'd given up. You were just waiting for someone to finish you off." Shira felt a pang in her chest at his words. It was true. She had given up. She had been waiting for someone to end her suffering, because she no longer had the strength to do it herself. But this soldier, he was different. He saw her, not as an object, not as a prize to be won, but as a person. She couldn't look at him, not yet. The weight of his words was too much, too real. She had spent so much time surviving on her own, that the thought of being cared for, of being valued, felt like a foreign concept. But then, the soldier spoke again, his voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. "Look, I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just offering you something. Option. I don't know what happened to you before. I don't know what they did, but I know what I can do. And what I can do is give you a choice. You don't have to be their prisoner anymore." Shira turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze for the first time since they entered the room. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no judgment. There was only honesty and something else, a flicker of hope. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said, the words feeling heavy on her tongue. "But I don't want to be a prisoner anymore." The soldier nodded, as if he understood everything without her needing to say more. "Then it's your choice, Shira. You're free to make it. I won't force you to do anything." Shira sat there, her hands trembling. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel trapped. She didn't feel like an object to be used, a tool for someone else's gain. There was a chance here, a real chance for something different, something better. And it scared her more than anything. But the longer she thought about it, the more she realized there was no going back. She had been broken for so long, but now there was a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in years. Something like freedom. She stood up slowly, her legs still. "Weak but steadier now. I'll stay. But only if you promise me one thing," she said, her voice stronger than before. The soldier raised an eyebrow. "Anything." Shira met his gaze, her eyes burning with determination. "You don't leave me behind. Not ever." The soldier smiled faintly, nodding. "I swear it." And just like that, Shira made her first choice. She was no longer alone. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers she couldn't yet see. But for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to face it. The air inside the underground base was thick with tension, heavier than it had ever felt. Shira's mind was still reeling from the promise of safety, the hope that had been so abruptly planted in her chest by the human soldier. She had chosen to stay, to trust him for now. But every new sound, every new shadow cast against the walls of the dimly lit corridors felt like an enemy, lurking just out of reach. She followed the soldier, her feet barely making a sound on the cold floor. The further they walked, the more. She felt the weight of the place pressing down on her, as if the walls themselves held secrets, some too dangerous to be revealed. She had no idea what this base was, nor who else might be here. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to steady her breath. Her voice was soft, yet there was a hard edge to her words. She didn't want to appear weak, not now. The soldier glanced back at her, his brow furrowing. "We're heading to a secure area. It's safer there." Safe. The word rang hollow in Shira's ears. She had been told she was safe so many times before, only to have it ripped away. Could she really believe that this soldier had no hidden agenda? She tried to focus on the feeling of the ground beneath her feet, trying to ground herself in the present and stop the swirl of paranoia that threatened to overtake her. But as they turned another corner, Shira saw something that made her blood run cold. The hallway opened up into a large, high-ceilinged room. At first, it seemed empty, but as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw something that froze her to the spot. Across the room, there were cells similar to the one she had just escaped from. The same cold metal bars, the same faint suffocating atmosphere, and there were people inside. Alien faces, their eyes hollow and vacant. Some of them were in chains. Others were hunched over, curled in positions that looked painful. All of them, like her, abandoned. Shira's heart skipped a beat, and she stumbled back, her feet dragging on the floor. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. "Who are they?" The soldier didn't answer right away, but his face had gone grim, more serious than she had ever seen. He turned to her, his eyes soft but filled with regret. "People like you," he said quietly. "People I couldn't save in time." Shira felt her breath catch in her throat. The soldier wasn't just a soldier, wasn't just a rescuer. He was part of something bigger, something she had yet to understand. Was he a part of this system too? Had he led her into another trap? "Are you ... She trailed off, unable to finish the question, her voice faltering. He turned to her, shaking his head. "No, I'm not part of this, but I'm connected to it. This place ... This base was supposed to be a sanctuary. A place for those who survived, for those who needed protection. But something went wrong. I don't know all the details, but I know what's happening here. This place is corrupted, and it's full of things I can't control. I'm doing what I can, but I'm not sure how much longer I can protect you." Shira's eyes darted between the cages, between the alien faces staring back at her. It was all too much. Too much to comprehend. The promise of safety, the promise of freedom, it was slipping through her fingers like sand. The more she learned, the more questions arose, and every new answer made her feel even more trapped than before. As the soldier turned to lead her out of the room, Shira noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. A group of humans stood at the far end of the room, observing the prisoners, their faces hidden behind dark visors. They were armed, their eyes scanning the alien prisoners like hunters inspecting their catch. One of the humans turned towards the soldier and gave him a nod, but it was a gesture that felt too knowing, too cold. There was no warmth, no sense of compassion, just business. Shira's gut twisted. "Who are they?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The soldier didn't look at her, but his jaw tightened. I don't know their exact rank, but they're part of a faction. They're not the ones I trust. They're the ones I've been trying to avoid. Shira's mind raced. If these people were part of the faction the soldier feared, then what had she really walked into? She had been so eager to escape the cage, so eager to believe that someone could help her, that she hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. What if this was just another prison? Another cage, but with a different face? The soldier's voice cut through her thoughts. Stay close, we're leaving here, now. But Shira didn't move immediately. Her eyes locked on the prisoners in the cages. She could feel the weight of their gaze, their silent plea for help. They were just like her, alone, forgotten, abandoned. It wasn't just her freedom at stake anymore. If she left now, would she be condemning them to their fate? Are you going to help them? She asked, her voice a little stronger than before. The soldier's face darkened, his eyes hardening. I don't know if I can. But I'm not giving up on you. That was all he said. And in those few words, Shira realized something that made her heart ache. This soldier, this human, was caught in a battle far larger than either of them. And as much as she wanted to believe in him, to trust that he could save them all, she knew the truth. There were forces here much stronger than either of them. Forces that might tear them apart before they even had a chance to fight back. As the soldier gently pulled her away, the sound of the prisoner's faint cries echoed in her ears. She had made her choice to stay, but now she wasn't so sure if it had been the right one. The hidden danger was real, and it was closing in. Shira had never been one to believe in fate or destiny. Life, she had learned, was about survival, nothing more, nothing less. She had been through too much to trust in the concept of things happening for a reason. But in the days that followed, her escape from the cage, something she couldn't quite explain, started to grow between her and the soldier. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something more. Every time the soldier spoke to her, it was with patience, with the kind of care that felt almost foreign to her. He didn't treat her like a thing, a tool, a trophy to be used. He treated her like a person. The small acts of kindness, the small gestures of respect, began to break through the walls she had spent so long building around her heart. And it was terrifying. One evening, as they sat together on the floor of a small, dimly lit room, Shira noticed something she hadn't before. The soldier had been talking to her, explaining the plans for the next few days, when he stopped mid-sentence. His eyes were on her, his focus so intense that she felt a blush rising in her cheeks, something she hadn't felt in years. Not since ... well, since everything had changed. You know, the soldier said, his voice softer now, I never thought I'd meet someone like you. Someone who could still fight. After everything. Shira didn't know how to respond. She'd been fighting for so long, but her battles weren't the same as his. His were with weapons and strategies. Hers were with survival and holding on to something resembling hope. The differences between them were vast, yet here they were. In the same room, sharing a space as though they were equals. I don't know if I'm still fighting, she said quietly, looking down at her hands, the faint scars on her skin telling their own painful story. I'm just ... trying not to give up. But I don't know how much longer I can keep going. I've lost so much. The soldier didn't speak right away, and for a moment, the silence between them felt heavy. But then he shifted closer, just enough for Shira to feel the warmth of his presence. Maybe that's the problem, he said gently. You're trying to do it all on your own. Shira frowned and looked up at him. What do you mean? He leaned back slightly, considering his words before speaking again. I'm here. You don't have to do it alone. You don't have to carry all this weight by yourself. Shira's breath hitched in her throat, his words so simple, but they cut deep. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. She didn't have to carry her past, her pain, her guilt alone. And yet, The weight of what he was offering, this connection, this bond, terrified her more than anything else. "I don't know how to trust anyone anymore," she admitted, her voice breaking a little. "I don't know how to let anyone in." The soldier didn't respond right away, but he didn't need to. He just stayed there, sitting next to her in silence, offering her a presence that was neither forceful nor demanding. It was just steady. "You don't have to trust me all at once," he said softly. "But little by little, maybe we can help each other." Shira looked up at him, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in so long: hope. It was a small thing, barely a flicker in the darkness, but it was there. For the first time since her capture, she didn't feel like the only person responsible for her survival. The soldier had shown her something she hadn't known: she could even hope for partnership. She didn't have to be the only one holding the weight of the world on her shoulders. That night, as they sat together in the quiet, Shira felt something shift inside her. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was real. The cold walls she had so carefully constructed around her heart began to crack, just a little. She still wasn't sure if she could trust him, or if she even had the right to, but in that moment, something between them had started to form. The next morning, they set out once again, moving through the underground base with careful steps, always alert, always watching. But this time, it was different. Shira moved with a little more confidence, her shoulders straighter, the weight of her past not quite so unbearable. The soldier didn't need to speak. His actions said everything. He helped her when she stumbled, gave her space when she needed it, and most importantly, never treated her like a broken thing. To him, she was a person, just like him, and that was a gift she hadn't known she needed. As they continued to move deeper into the heart of the base, Shira's mind returned to the prisoners she had seen earlier. They had been just like her, abandoned, forgotten, left to rot in the dark. She couldn't shake the thought of them, the desperate looks in their eyes, the silent pleas for someone to care. She looked over at the soldier, who was busy checking their path for any signs of danger. His brow was furrowed, lips set in a hard line. There was a man determined to protect her. But she couldn't help thinking that there were more people out there who needed saving, more lives at stake. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence. He didn't look at her, but his voice was steady. "Every day, but right now, we take it one step at a time." Shira nodded, the heaviness of the world pressing on her chest. She had no idea what the future held, no idea what would happen in the days to come. But for the first time in a long time, she was no longer facing it alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The underground base felt eerily quiet, like a place holding its breath before a storm. Shira could sense it, an unease that permeated the air, a sense of something ominous lurking just beneath the surface. She tried to push the feeling aside, focusing instead on the soldier beside her, but the whispers of doubt kept creeping back into her mind. Something was wrong. Something was coming, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it had something to do with the soldier she had begun to trust. They had been walking for hours through the maze of narrow corridors and dimly lit rooms, the walls closing in on them as if the base itself were alive, watching them. Shira tried to ignore the unease, but she couldn't stop glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting to see something or someone lurking in the shadows. When they reached a door at the far end of the hallway, the soldier paused, his hand resting on the cold metal. He glanced at Shira, his eyes dark, almost pained. "I need to go in there alone," he said, his voice low. "Stay here. I'll be back soon." Shira's heart skipped a beat. She had grown accustomed to their silent partnership, to the way he had always included her, always made her feel like she wasn't alone in this. And now he was telling her to wait, to stay behind. "Why?" she asked, her voice betraying the unease she felt. "What's in there?" The soldier didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, his expression hardening, the lines around his eyes tightening with concern. I need to check something. It's better if you don't get involved. Shira could feel her instincts flaring up. Something wasn't right. She had seen the way the soldier's posture had changed since they entered the base. His usual confidence, his unwavering resolve, was now replaced with a tense, almost guarded energy. Was he hiding something? Was he hiding her from something? Before she could say anything else, he pushed the door open, stepping inside, leaving. Shira standing alone in the hallway. Her mind raced, and despite every warning bell screaming in her head, she couldn't just stand there. She couldn't wait idly, not when everything inside her screamed that something was wrong. Without thinking, Shira slipped quietly through the door, her heart pounding as she moved silently through the shadows. She barely made a sound as she crept toward the center of the room, where the soldier stood talking to another figure, a human figure, tall and imposing, dressed in dark armor. The moment she saw the other person's face, her blood turned to ice. It was one of the humans she had seen earlier, one of the ones who had been watching the alien prisoners with cold, dispassionate eyes. The same man who had nodded at the soldier in that chilling, too knowing gesture. Shira's breath caught in her throat as she took in their conversation. She couldn't hear the words clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. There was no warmth, no compassion in their exchange, only business. Cold, calculating business. You're sure she's the one? The man's voice cut through the silence, low but filled with authority. Yes, the soldier replied, his voice tense. She's the one who escaped. I found her. She's valuable. Shira's heart stopped. She felt her body go cold, her stomach twisting with a sickening realization. Valuable? What did he mean by that? Why was he talking about her like she was some kind of commodity? Like she was a thing to be traded, to be used. Before she could process her shock, the soldier spoke again, his voice more urgent now. I can't let them find out about her. She's too important. The other man laughed, a low, cruel sound that sent a chill down Shira's spine. You think you can protect her forever? You're fooling yourself. The higher-ups want her, and they'll stop at nothing to get her. Shira's world felt like it was spinning. The higher-ups? What was going on? Had everything been a lie? Was the soldier playing her this whole time? Was he just another part of the system that had trapped her in the first place? No. It couldn't be. The soldier had saved her. He had promised to protect her. But now, hearing him speak like this, in this cold, calculating manner, made her question everything. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she backed away, desperate to escape before they saw her. She couldn't trust him, not anymore. But then, just as she was about to turn and flee, the soldier's voice called out to her. Shira! His voice was harsh, panicked, like he knew she had been eavesdropping. Get back here! She froze, her heart racing. The weight of betrayal pressed down on her chest, suffocating her. Had he known all along? Had he been using her this entire time? Or had she simply been a pawn in his game, just like everyone else? The soldier stepped forward, his hand outstretched, his eyes wide with desperation. Listen to me, Shira, it's not what you think. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. But his words felt hollow now, like empty promises. She wanted to believe him, she really did. But the doubt had already taken root, spreading like poison through her mind. She couldn't trust him anymore. She couldn't trust anyone. With her heart pounding in her chest, Shira spun around and ran, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors of the base. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know what was real anymore. But one thing was certain. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't stay with him. As she ran, the bitter taste of betrayal lingered on her tongue, and she realized with a sharp, painful clarity that she was more alone than she had ever been. The cold, sterile walls of the underground base felt like they were closing in around Shira as she sprinted down the hallway, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The soldier's voice echoed behind her, calling her name, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop, not now. Her heart pounded in her chest, the weight of betrayal heavy in every step. She had thought she'd found an ally in him, a human who saw her, who understood her pain. But now everything had changed. The soldier, the one she had trusted, had been playing her all along. She was just another pawn in his world of deception. Every door she passed felt like a reminder of the choices she had made, the choices that had led her here, the cages, the prisoners, the false promises. Her thoughts raced, but her feet didn't falter. She couldn't afford to think too much, couldn't afford to feel the sting of the broken trust. Not when she was running for her life. The sound of footsteps behind her grew louder, and she knew she wasn't alone anymore. The soldiers who had watched her in the cells, the ones who had seen her as nothing more than a broken thing, were closing in. They were after her now. They knew she was here. They had found her. Shira's mind raced. What now? There was no escape. No way out. The base was a maze, and she had no idea where to turn. She couldn't outrun them. She couldn't hide forever. But there had to be something she could do. She wasn't going to let herself be trapped again. Her eyes fell on a nearby door, slightly ajar. Without thinking, she darted through it, her heart in her throat. The room was dark, filled with the hum of machines she didn't understand. It was a control room, one that seemed to be at the heart of the base. She could see monitors, flashing with information, a system of controls that was completely foreign to her. She didn't know what she was doing, but her instincts screamed at her to act. She had to do something. She couldn't just be another prisoner. She wasn't going to be anyone's tool. Shira's hands trembled as she reached for the console. She didn't understand the language, didn't know what any of the buttons or levers did, but her desperation drove her forward. She pressed a button, then another, and before she could stop herself, alarms began to blare throughout the base. The sound was deafening screeching, high-pitched warnings that echoed off the walls. She could hear the shouts of soldiers outside, the room running toward her. But then something strange happened. The doors to the control room slid shut with a resounding clang, locking her inside. The alarms continued to blare, but Shira was no longer sure if it was a warning or if it was something else. Had she triggered some kind of security lockdown? Was she helping herself or making things worse? She could hear footsteps growing louder, the soldiers closing in. Her heart raced. There was no time to think. No time to second-guess herself. She couldn't be caught. She couldn't let them take her back. Desperation and adrenaline surged through her as she scanned the room. Her eyes landed on a large red button near the center of the console, glowing ominously. Something told her that pressing it would make things worse, but something else inside her whispered that it might be her only chance. Without another thought, Shira slammed her palm down on the button. The room shook as a low rumbling. Noise filled the space, and the base seemed to come alive around her. Lights flickered, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and the screens on the monitors went black, only to be replaced by a series of flashing red warnings. And then silence. The alarms had stopped. The soldiers' footsteps outside the room had gone quiet. Shira stood frozen, trying to catch her breath. The control room was now sealed off, and she had no idea what had just happened. She had made her choice, pressed the button without thinking, without knowing what the consequences would be. But now the base was silent. The soldiers weren't coming. At least not immediately. Shira didn't wait around to find out what would happen next. Her pulse still racing, she turned and ran toward the back of the control room, where a small hatch led to a narrow ventilation shaft. She didn't know if it would lead her to freedom, but she had to try. As she crawled into the vent, the noise from the base outside seemed to fade away, replaced by the sound of her breath echoing in the metal. The air was stale, and her body ached from the constant tension, but she pressed on, knowing there was no turning back now. The soldier had betrayed her. The base had betrayed her. but she would not betray herself. Shira's mind was clouded with confusion, but one thing was crystal clear: she wasn't going to give up. She wasn't going to let anyone control her anymore. She had made her choice, and now it was time to see it through. In the darkness of the ventilation shaft, Shira realized that this was her fight. The final stand was hers alone. She didn't know what lay ahead, what danger she would face, or how far she would have to go. But for the first time, she felt like she was in control. Her freedom, her survival, everything now depended on her.